So once again, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for the 11th meeting, I counted, of the British Postgraduate Philosophy Association Spring Seminar Series. My name's Nino Kadic, and I'm a PhD student at King's College London and the BPPA's Communications Officer for this year. We're very excited to have Adriana Alcaraz-Sánchez here with us as a student at the University of Glasgow. So there was an error with the email list. We said that she's from the University of Bristol, so I apologize for that. No, Adriana is from the University of Glasgow. She's going to present a paper entitled, "What is Lucid about Lucid Dreamless Sleep?" So before we get going, just a word about the seminar series and how we will do today. This seminar series will meet every Friday until the 25th of June at 4 p.m. UK time, GMT, each week. And we have a really diverse group of people, of graduate students, who will present their research across numerous areas of philosophy in the coming weeks. So you're welcome to save the date and the Zoom link in your calendar as a recurring meeting, because it'll be the same Zoom link all the time, every single time, the same one. But we'll also, just in case, send out the details of each talk at the beginning of every week. And if you want to see the seminar schedule, you can do so here on this website. I posted it in the chat. Okay, so turning to the day, I'll shortly turn things over to Adriana, who will speak for about 40 minutes. Then we'll have a 2-minute break just to collect our thoughts, and then we'll have a Q&A, which will last about 20 minutes. And we shouldn't run much over the hour. So please keep your mics off unless you're asking a question in the Q&A, and feel free to turn your video off for bandwidth. You can also bring food like I have. I have some Chinese udon noodles. Or pets or drinks. And for the Q&A, we will use the hand-finger system. So hand for a new question or line of questioning, and a finger just for a follow-up. And I'll remind you of that again when we get there. So, all right, we're happy to have Adriana here with us, and I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Nino, and thank you for inviting me to come. So just a very quick background myself. So I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Glasgow. And what I'm presenting you here, it's part of my research. Actually, have been working on this paper for quite a long time right now. So what I'm presenting to you is actually the final version of it, which it may change some bit from the abstract that you read in the email, which I will clarify that. But there are some parts where I still like a work in progress. So on those, I will make a note while I'm presenting that I may need like to have some thoughts about it. So I welcome any advice that you may have. Similarly, I will leave my email at the end. So if like someone really wants to read the paper and like go through it or give me more feedback on it, more than welcome. So I'm trying to condense everything together in this 40-minute presentation, but of course I need to leave some things outside. Okay. Sorry. So just for a bit of background before I go like to actual the structure of the paper. So we'll start with an introduction about what dreamless sleep is, or what it takes to be, at least for this paper. Okay, so kind of like when we hear the word dreamless sleep, you need to take it that in the what actually the word means. So it will be a state that you have during a sleep, which is dreamless, which means you are sleeping, but you are not dreaming. Okay, so it seems that at least the traditional view in neuroscience used to be that during dreamless sleep used to be equal to a state of unconsciousness. So if you are not dreaming, you're not having any experience, therefore you're unconscious when you're in dreamless sleep. Okay, but this view has changed and has been challenged as well for many people. And now it's kind of like moving towards a view that is kind of like acknowledging of the fact that you can have some other sort of experiences during dreamless sleep that are not dreams, but are other experiences. Therefore, we are not always unconscious during this period. We may have already like different sort of conscious states, okay? But the picture that I'm presenting here, what I'm focusing on, is a particular view that has been portrayed by Vedic traditions. So these are Indian philosophical traditions that are based on the Vedas. such as the Advaita Vedanta. For these Indian schools, they have like actually a very different view of what neuroscience has here, which is that consciousness is never lost, including during dreamless sleep. Okay, so just as a disclaimer, that's not something that I endorse. So I will argue that in some moments during a sleep, you do lose consciousness altogether. There's nothing that you are experiencing. But I agree with this, at least with this school, that yeah, at some points we may have different sort of experiences that are not dreams. But here, what I'm going to be focusing is on this description in particular of what dreamless sleep is taken to be by these philosophical schools. So for the Advaita Vedanta, for instance, the dreamless sleep is conceived under the name of Sushupti, coming from the Sanskrit. And they describe this as a state of pure awareness. So pure awareness for these schools means that during this period, so in this state of Sushupti, I'm not aware of any object-directed thing, so I'm not aware of something. So it's not awareness of there's no awareness of anything whatsoever. So it's a state that is it lacks the kind of like self-other duality typical of wakefulness, of me being aware of something. So it's a state of pure awareness, which as well for these schools, this also refers to a notion which is called witness consciousness, or Saksin, which is quite specific. So it's kind of like making emphasis again here that you are never aware of a thing, even if like when they describe what witness consciousness is, they refer about the sort of awareness, it's aware of itself, but you as a subject, you are not aware of this awareness. Okay, you are just merely aware. Okay, so that's the way in which this state is being described. But then we find other sort of descriptions coming from Tibetan Buddhism, in which this similar state of dreamless sleep, which is also conceived as a state of pure awareness, and making more emphasis to the fact that you can recognize this state while you are in the state. So while the state is unfolding, you have awareness of the state, but the awareness of the state, again, is not an object-directed awareness. You are just merely aware. We find mentions, well, to this description, and their names of practices such as luminosity or sleep yoga. I will comment a bit more at the end of the talk about those. But yeah, main idea here is that you are aware, or you recognize the essence of your mind while you are in this state. And many times this is referred as a lucid state, okay? A state in which I'm lucid during dreamless sleep. So of course, the question here is like, okay, we have different descriptions. Are we then talking about different sort of states? That's something I will return to it at the end of the talk again. But for now, take it as that we are talking about the same sort of a state. It's just that in some cases, this is referred as lucid. In some cases, it's not, okay? So that's kind of like the picture that also some contemporary authors have followed. So they have taken these lucid descriptions of dreamless sleep at face value, and then have put forward an account of lucid dreamless sleep as a state of non-conceptual awareness. So the sort of awareness that I have is non-conceptual, and kind of like the state represents like the word in a way, but in a non-conceptual way, okay? And then moreover, this has been related to the sort of lucidity that we have during lucid dreaming. To be fair, the way in which lucid dreamless sleep has been related to lucid dreaming is quite speculative. So it's not something anyone is defending as, oh, they are two states that are intrinsically related or they are the same. So the proposal here has been something more like, okay, well, it looks like the lucid dreamless sleep may follow lucid dreaming, or the people who are having these experiences are always lucid dreamers. So it may be something that we are maybe talking about the same sort of lucidity, okay? So that's kind of like the thing I want to in here. So it's like, what makes lucid dreamless? I didn't read that properly. What makes lucid dreamless sleep actually lucid? So are we then in fact talking about the same sort of lucidity that we have during lucid dreaming? And if not, if we are talking about any other sort of lucidity, then what is this lucidity? What we are accounting for? Can we actually then say that this is a lucid state or not? So here's the plan for my talk and what I actually have done in my paper, which is to start by presenting an actual technical account of what lucidity is taken to be, at least in lucid dreaming. Because these authors are saying, okay, the sort of lucidity that we are talking about in lucid dreamless sleep, it may be similar. Okay, so then we need to start by knowing what is actually the account of lucidity in lucid dreaming to know whether we're actually talking of the same. Then I will cover limit cases. So these are states in which are in the threshold of lucidity, but are not actually lucid. And then I will explain why they are not minimally lucid. And then with these notions, once we have these notions in place, I will move into considering how these notions of lucidity and prelucidity may apply to states of pure awareness, which after all are the ones that we are looking at, like dreamless sleep, as it has been described for Vedic traditions, okay? So I will conclude that in any case, the dreamless sleep as it's described should be understood in any case as pre-lucid, but not lucid. But however, all these notions will affect the ontology that we have. We take dreamless sleep to have. You know? So it will affect like where we then describe this dreamless sleep as an actual pure awareness or as something. Okay, so testing part first, which is to talk about lucid dreaming, which I guess that maybe not all of you have ever experienced what a lucid dream is. But it may be something that at least everyone knows what it is, or you may have like your own idea of what it will look like, or how it will be the case when you are actually having a lucid dream. So what will happen? Okay, so may have also this impression that lucid dreaming will involve us to take control of our dreams. So I put here the picture of like mainstream movie on lucid dream, which is Inception. And so yeah, we will have like this idea, you know, that I'm actually lucid in a dream, then I'm gonna be able to take over the dream narrative and will be able to fly, to do whatever, change the environment, will be the maximum lucid dream, which I can take control of everything. No? And the thing is that actually we look into experimental research, these fully controlled lucid dreams in which you can do whatever you want are actually rare, so that's not happening most of the times. So the current position in dream research is to have like a more graded view of what lucidity is. So then it will range from having like different sort of lucidity levels. Okay, so ranging from just knowing that you are dreaming to having a full-fledged immersive experience in which you know that you're dreaming, but you can also kind of like act willingly and do whatever you want. Then you also have like a kind of like sudden and extreme change in your phenomenal experience in that. Okay. So dream research also shows that lucid dreaming doesn't always involve explicitly self-reflection. So you don't always need to arrive to the state in which you have a lucid dream by kind of like being reflecting or reasoning about the fact that things that are around you are not real, but it kind of like can appear spontaneously. Okay, so it doesn't always involve at least to have this propositional thought of like self-reflection about, oh, what's going on. Okay, so the question here is like, if you have this graded view of lucidity, but at the same time, in terms of as a methodological constraint, when we ask people in the sleep lab, or we are actually taking reports of dreams, and the only way we have to kind of like say that the dream was a lucid dream or not is just the fact that that person explicitly says, well, I was aware I was dreaming, I knew that that was a dream. Okay, so the question here, or what I want to focus is like, what marks this transition between non-lucid and lucid dreams? So we are trying to, because again, what we want to say here is not we don't trying to see like all sort of lucidities within lucid dreaming, but we're trying to find what is the minimum. So what is the necessary and sufficient condition to say something is lucid? Then we can apply to other states as like dreamless sleep. Okay. So here's the view that I defend, which so say that might change a bit from what it was in the abstract I sent, just because I changed some bits from the wording that were very problematic. So what I argue is that following what Dreamless says, that lucidity involves a recognition that what I took to be real, so I could have been taking this to be just the actual real world, or I just take that to be real. It's actually not real, but it's a hallucinatory experience. So let me explain that. So when I'm in a non-lucid dream, I just go do my things around, and then I take this to be reality. Whereas when I'm in a lucid dream, I not only know that I'm in a dream, but I may not have the concept of what a dream is, or not understand that. But what I'm actually realizing is that, yeah, that what I was taking to be something that I was actually seeing, as in terms of perception. So let's say, for instance, I'm hanging out with my friend in a dream. I'm not actually with my friend. I'm not actually even perceiving my friend, because if you take perceiving as to be a success verb, so something like I'm actually seeing as in reality, that's not happening. Okay, so I have this sudden realization that the content of my perceptual state is false, and this affects my phenomenal experience. I put that as a question mark there, where we have a phenomenal switch. What that means, like whether by me, in virtue of having this realization that what I take to be actually seen is not something I'm really seeing, so I'm not in contact with the world, where that will affect the way in which I have my phenomenal experience, where that will then change to me having a more hyper real experience where things will be perceived different. I leave that as an open question, because again, empirical research doesn't show that it's always the case. So therefore, there's something that should be investigated further, but it actually marks this onset of lucidity. How is that experience? That's something, again, as a side note, that is not kind of like investigated that much in research. And yeah, lastly, I also put this condition as like, well, you need to self-ascribe the state to yourself. So you need to know that there's some experience that you are undertaking. Not that it could be had by someone else, but just like, that you are applying this into your case. Okay, so you're saying, it's me, I'm having this experience that I was taking this to be reality, but in fact it's a virtually generated one. Okay. So put in a more technical way, if we're trying to extract the features of this experience of lucidity I'm presenting, we will say that conceptually, this is a higher order state. So during a state of lucidity, there's a meta representation of my first order experiential state as being as in some way. In this case, as not being a state that consists of perceptual contact with the world. So for instance, this may come in the form of a belief that what is in front of me is in fact real, and thus that I'm not actually seeing anything. And the good thing of having such a conceptual account of lucidity is that allow us to apply this notion to other mental states. And then what I claim here is that, well, given that lucidity allows us to realize that the state doesn't consist of perceptual contact with the world, then this notion can only be applied to perceptual states. So yeah, we couldn't take this notion and say we're having a lucid belief or a lucid thought, for instance. So I don't have much time here to expand more on this footnote, in a way I put under in this box, but I just I'm happy to talk more about that later in the Q&A if you are curious about it. But here what I try to do in this section of the paper is to expand my view and to see how it will work if we apply this to other perceptual states, which, for instance, will be the case if you're thinking about cases of realizing that we're having a hallucination or an illusion during wakefulness. So explain how this will account to lucidity. But then I also consider cases in which we can even widen up this notion and say, well, it could be that it's not just that I'm recognizing that I'm not in perceptual contact with the world right now, but that I'm realizing that I was not. So for instance, put this as an example of pathological cases or cases in which of like after being a period of intoxication. So like, okay, there's like this transition in which I realize that now I am in contact with reality, but I was not before. And then I also consider cases of what I call false lucidity. So let's say cases in which I realize about the hallucinatory nature of my experience, but I don't classify that as a dream. So in the case of dreaming, it's like, imagine that you are realizing about the fact that you are having a hallucinatory experience, but then you take this to be a different sort of altered state of consciousness, but you don't take this to be a dream. So I give that as a possibility of saying, okay, why these states won't be considered as lucid? We could say that the only thing that changed here is just that I'm not classifying the state correctly, but I still experience lucidity. Okay, so the difficult part is this second bit, or this is what I have found more difficult to argue for, which are these cases that I was saying before, which were limit cases of lucidity. So cases in which we are in the threshold, okay? So states in which we may become lucid, we may not, we are just there in between. So the problem with that is because if you want to kind of like defend a great view of lucidity, as it's been done in dream research, we go from like having just insight to the fact that we are dreaming to maximum lucidity. So what is this insight about the fact that I'm dreaming? What marks, what we will say that it's actually lucid or it's not, okay? So let me explain this a bit more. So yeah, pre-lucidity here are states that by themselves are not lucid. So are actually non-lucid. It's just that pre-lucidity will be a type of lucidity, okay? So it will be these dreams in which are not completely non-lucid, but this involves some sort of metacognition, and that also comes from dream research. It shows that even non-lucid dream, even in not lucid dreams, we can have some metacognition. So I can hold thoughts about my current state, even if I fail to classify the dream as a dream, but I may still realize there is something odd with my experience, or focus on the bizarre elements of my experience, okay? The thing is, like, some authors take these pre-lucid states to be in cases of implicit knowledge about the fact that I'm dreaming. So the ongoing state is represented as a dream, yet I don't explicitly know that I am dreaming. So I don't have like a thought that says something like, oh, I am dreaming. But that might be there. It's some way in which the experience is being represented as a dream, but I am not aware of that fact. Okay. So here present the case of these two authors, Jennifer Wind and Metzinger, who defend this sort of lucidity, which they call attentional lucidity or alucidity, in which some sort, like in some parts when they're talking about this sort of lucidity, they refer to it as a case of pre-lucidity, and in some other parts they refer to it as a sort of weaker lucidity. So some moments it's difficult to know exactly where they take this to be a case of minimally lucidity. So like it's actually lucid versus a case of a state that leads to lucidity, okay? Here we'll defend that actually what they're talking about is it's an enabling condition for lucidity. And this is because Wind also comments more on this sort of lucidity, and she describes that as a state of feeling of knowing of something. So she appeals to the concept of noetic feelings, which I will explain further in the next slides. And then she says, well, this state is a state of non-propositional metacognition. So it's a state that represents the state as that of a dream, but that is given in virtue of the content of my phenomenal experience. So in this case, I may perceive that something is familiar on the dream. The dream, what is actually a dream, but I don't take the dream to be a dream. I may perceive like something as being real, or or something is familiar, something that I know, but I never really have the concept of this is a dream. Okay. The question here is whether then this noetic feeling, so this feeling of knowing something alone, will suffice to say that I have lucidity, or I need something else. Or actually, even the question will be like, what is her view? Where is that will be enough, or we need to have something else? So noetic feelings in the literature, they are described, they're a bit controversial as well, but they are described as first order representations. So most authors take this to be, again, So a state that represents my ongoing mental state in a non-conceptual manner. All the time when I'm saying non-conceptual means that I don't hold concepts about this state. So for instance, I don't have the concept of what a dream is, okay? But there's no awareness of this first order representation. So I may just, in the case of noetic feelings, for instance, in the literature, they're normally represented or given as an example, the case of tip of the tongue feeling. So you ask me, I don't know, do you know the name of this person? Or someone who has been introduced to someone is like, oh, I know your name, but now I have forgotten. So you don't really have the name. So you don't really kind of like, you keep asking me, maybe I will come up with a name, but it's more about this feeling of like, it's almost there. I know this name, but it doesn't really come to me. Okay. So now what they normally say authors in the literature of noetic feelings is that, well, I don't really know the content of my knowledge, so I don't really have access to that, in this case, the name of this person. But in a way, I may have this information, isn't it? So in the case of the dream, it will be the same. So I may have the concept of what a dream is. It's just not available in that moment, okay? But in the case of like, if we are talking about minimal lucidity, at least for this view in terms of explaining lucidity with the appeal of noetic feelings, it seems that we need something else. So we cannot just appeal to noetic feelings alone, but we require a meta-representational state. So it requires a state that represents the first order state, so my experience, in a particular way. In this case, a status of a dream. And it has to have some sort of attitude to the content of my experience state, such that I take my experience not to be to be of hallucinatory nature. Okay, so in a way, I cannot have just the noetic feelings, but I need to give an explanation in a way about what those noetic feelings are. So I have this feeling of something, of knowing something. Then in virtue of my first order state to be represented in a particular way, such as being a dream, then is what I can explain, oh yeah, having this feeling of knowing because I'm in a dream, okay? So yeah, it's just that kind of like extra bit that maybe is missing from Vint account of like, we would need to have this meta representation. Then the question is like, where then we can still be talking about noetic feelings. It's in the literature, at least many people defend that they're not always involved meta representations. So just to finalize this section, then what I then propose is like, okay, when we are talking, we should then reserve the term prelucidity to only describe cases of procedural metacognition. So states in which, represents the state as the state it is, but I don't have kind of a reflective awareness about that state. Okay, so are just first order representations. I represent the state in virtue of having phenomenal awareness of my current state, and that's it. But I don't actually know this is a dream in a propositional way. Okay. And I regard them as cases of non-conceptual insight, following some things I will explain you better later. So this concept of non-conceptual insight is used a lot in the literature. So I say, okay, prelucidity will be these cases of non-conceptual insight. And then if you're talking about weaker or minimal lucidity, we cannot be talking about prelucidity in the same way as well, because then we will be confounding what we are talking about. So just to summarize what I have done so far, so I've proposed this view what minimal lucidity is, which I have said that is to take in a kind of like to be in a higher order state in which I represent my state to be a dream, and that is done in virtue of realizing that actually having a hallucination. In a way, forget this about that. It's not you don't need to have the concept of like what the hallucination is. It's just maybe to kind of like realize that you are not really perceiving anything. You may have an experience, and that may be experience are real, but you are not actually in direct contact with the world. That I have considered like how this goes with the other notions that we find in the literature, such as prelucidity. And I have say that we leave just this term of prelucidity for cases in which I have procedural metacognition, I have a state that represents a state as a state it is, but there's no propositional awareness whatsoever. And now I'm moving into explaining how this may apply to cases of pure awareness, which at the end of the day, that's the kind of states that we are looking at here when we are considering dreamless sleep. So before looking into dreamless sleep, I will consider the case of meditation. That's because, as I will show you, they are quite related, the way in which they have been accounted for. So I will show you the similar ways in which it has been described and how I take this to be kind of like, yeah, have the same issues at the end of the day of like how if we describe them as being lucid, okay? So amongst meditation, styles of meditation, there's one particular one called objectless meditation practices. We also receive the name of open monitoring meditation practices. And these ones are described as meditation practices in which there is no object directed awareness. So normally when you are practicing that sort of meditation, you will be told just to kind of like remain open, monitoring your awareness, so you are not paying attention to, let's say, the body or your breath, okay? You're told not to pay attention to anything. So there's no explicit awareness of the content of your ongoing state. There's no thoughts or anything that you're aware of. And we find example of this sort of meditation, they're called the Samatha and Mahamudra meditation. And some authors describe that as an award that during this state of Mahamudra meditation, we are aware of the essence of consciousness, or we are in a state that is the clarity of our awareness, okay? So that's when it starts becoming a more similar with I explained in the introduction about what dreamless sleep was. And again, this also is accounted for in different ways, but the one I'm going to explain is the appeal to non-dual awareness. So many authors, when talking about this sort of objectless meditation practices, they say that what happens, or what is described in this sort of a state, is a state of non-dual awareness. So non-dual awareness received this name because it's non-dual, so it's non-dualistic. There's not this sort of subject-object structure again that you may have in kind of like ordinary experiences, which is an I being aware of something, so lacks that. Some authors, again, they take this to be kind of the essence of the background of all experiences. So non-dual awareness is always there. In a way, it's the baseline, and then we add things on top. And these are being described as to appeal to reflexivity. So are states that they refer to themselves, but they don't take themselves as an object. So in a way, they are self-representational. So again, as I did before, if we take this in a more technical sense, more conceptual way, these are described, so these states of non-dual awareness, or these states that we have in objectless meditation, are described as non-conceptual and non-propositional meta-awareness. That's a concept that I didn't make up myself, that's taken from the literature. So that way, it's a state that is non-conceptual, we don't have any concepts, we don't have any propositions either, but we are meta-aware. And then there's the problem that seems to rise there, like how can I be meta-aware of something that lacks concepts and lacks prepositions? So the way to explain that, what they do is to appeal to the fact that, again, the state is meta-representative, it's meta-aware in virtue of you having a representation of how the state is. And that is given in in the phenomenal character of the experience. So I am aware, the state presents things to me, and that for them suffices for that to be a state of meta-awareness. But it's not meta-representational. It's just like me having awareness, just having phenomenal awareness, nothing else. Okay. And this relates then to the idea of lucidity, because sometimes when these states of non-dual awareness during meditation are being described, And they're being described as a state of clarity, luminosity, or lucidity. The same as we found at the beginning, I was explaining you at the beginning of this talk. So for these traditions, these three concepts, clarity, luminosity, or lucidity, are related. So it's a state in which I am aware of the quality of awareness itself. It's a state of pure phenomenal experience, so it's just pure phenomenality. And that's for them what lucidity is, in a way. So then the question here is this then a lucid state at all? Well, not if we are using the technical notion of lucidity, so not at least in the same way as we refer to lucid dreams. As I say, if we want to describe something lucid as in the same way or the same understanding that we have in lucid dreaming, then it requires you to take the content of your ongoing state to not consist of perceptual contact with the world, which in turn requires a higher ordered state that doesn't seem to be taking place during states of objectless meditation or non-dual awareness. So we may wonder whether then they are lucid in this way. And if they are lucid in a different sense, then that would be a pre-theoretical notion that we haven't considered. And then this author should explain us what they mean with that. Okay, so now the final bit. All this relates to dreamless sleep. How do we connect them, all these ideas, to the notion of dreamless sleep? So as I was saying, it's just because it's more or less the same. So the way that Tibetan Buddhism has to explain what lucid dreamless is, so the way in which they describe what lucid dreamless is the same sort of description that we find in objectless meditation or non-dual awareness. So they describe this as a state in which we recognize the clear light sleep. So this state of lucidity during dreamless sleep is referred to as the clear light, which is the substrate of consciousness or the fundamental nature of the mind itself. So I find this is to be like the essence of consciousness. Okay, I'm in a state in which I'm not aware of anything in an object-directed manner. I'm merely aware. I'm just in a state of pure phenomenal consciousness. And for them, the way in which to explain that this is a lucid state, the same explanation I just told you, the same way to explain that this is a state of meta-awareness is because during this state, I realize the nature of my ongoing state, just in virtue of accessing the contents of my phenomenal experience. So the only thing I'm having in that moment is I'm just having phenomenal experience, and it's just in virtue of me having this phenomenal experience that I'm aware of my state. But there's no sort of reflective thought or propositional thought about the state itself. Okay. So as I explained in the introduction as well, some authors have followed up in this idea. So I'll go a bit more in detail about this. So even Thompson, for instance, who is one of the first who follow up on this notion of lucid dreamless sleep, he says, whereas lucid dreaming consists in knowing that you are dreaming, lucid dreamless sleep is said to consist in being able to witness the state of dreamless sleep and recall its phenomenal clarity upon awakening, or upon waking up, sorry. The way in which he has to explain that, because here, the only bit I show you from the quote is, what I haven't explained you is like what it means to witness this state. That refers back again to this notion of witness consciousness that I explained in the introduction. So it's just the consciousness, just being aware in virtue of that, just being conscious. Okay. So again, he explains lucid dreamless sleep with the same appeal of pure awareness that the Advaita Vedanta or the Tibetan Buddhism was explaining. Okay. And then Vint follows on that, and then she explains a bit further by saying that lucid dreamless sleep is the feeling of just having become aware of the nature of one's ongoing state. Okay, so then here we are appealing to this feeling of knowing something, but we are not knowing yet that we are in a state of dreamless sleep. You just know something. So as I showed you before, it seems that this is a problem if we just appeal to this noetic feeling, or this feeling of knowing, this alone won't suffice. It should involve a meta-representational state. We should involve this, at least knowing that I am in a dreamless sleep state. If that is there in place, then we are kind of like keep adding things into this pure awareness state, isn't it? So then the question here is, will this be lucid? To what extent then I need to subjectively know that I'm in a state of dreamless sleep? Well, this state is ongoing. So to what extent I really need to have this feeling of knowing that I'm in a dreamless sleep? And then the problem that that presents too is like, okay, well, but then it's that's the kind of thing that we will say is lucid in the same way as lucid dreaming. Then are we having then a recognition of the hallucinatory nature of this state? So I told you when I was presenting the view of minimal lucidity, that seems only to apply to perceptual states. So then we will also need to conclude that dreamless sleep is a case as a perceptual state. Okay. So just final bits here is just to show you that, yeah, we won't have a problem of like, how do we describe this state that for the Advaita Vedanta is, it was a state of pure awareness. No? So how pure is this pure awareness? Is it actually just pure phenomenality? Is a state that doesn't involve any intentional object whatsoever? It's a state of reflexive consciousness, so it's self-representational, what it is exactly. So we need to know a bit more about that too. But the ultimate problem will seem to arise from the fact of like, we want to say that this state is similar to lucid dreaming, then it will involve a higher order state, and it will involve to have this kind of access to the content of my phenomenal experience, and then to realize that I'm not in contact with the real world, then we may wonder where that's what's going on during dreamless sleep. Okay. So yes, the conclusion of all that. So there's this notion of lucid dreamless sleep, which I argue is a misnomer because it's not clear which notion of lucidity is being used, but we are describing lucid dreamless sleep. It's not clear either what is the state, kind of a state at play, so whether we are actually talking of this purely phenomenal state with no intentional content, a state that at least is aware of itself, or if we are then talking about something completely different, if we are appealing then to the notion of lucidity used in lucid dreaming. And then it's not clear either whether then this state could be lucid as lucid dreaming. So we may be talking about something else. So yeah, here kind of like wrap up that. So I ended this paper by having kind of like what would be another sort of research that I'm taking, which is then to kind of go through different descriptions that have been made of dreamless sleep and show lucid dreamless sleep, and showing that, well, we seem to be describing different sort of states. In some cases, these sort of states that they describe it even look more like dreams, so not much as dreamless sleep. They also involve, in most of cases, a more awareness of oneself during the experience. Then it's not completely then this lack of self-order duality that we were talking about. So yeah, it seems to be much more going on there. But here in this paper, I just want to kind of like more in detail about what lucid is when we are appealing to lucid dreaming as well. Okay, so that's me. Just drop me an email if you want to know more. You don't have time to ask me questions here, but I'm also welcome for you to give me more ideas about that too. Thank you.